For 5 years, her husband, a respected Manhattan lawyer, had convinced the entire world she was insane. He smiled in church on Sundays. He donated to charity. He was loved. And every night behind a locked door, he taught her one lesson over and over. You're an orphan, Aretha. Nobody will ever believe you. Nobody is coming for you. Tonight, she finally ran. She boarded the last Q train out of Brooklyn, her face hidden beneath a red knitted sweater, her hands shaking around a worn leather handbag. She thought she was alone. She wasn't. The Korean man who sat down beside her, tailored navy suit dragon tattoos climbing his neck, a silver watch worth more than her entire life, didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her like he already knew her name. And that should have terrified her more than anything Jerry had ever done. Before we begin, drop a comment below. Tell me your city and what time it is right now. I read every single one. If stories like this move, you smash that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The rain in Brooklyn that night fell in sheets, the kind of cold November rain that soaks through wool and shame alike. Aretha Akeem ran down the wet sidewalk, her sneakers slapping against the pavement, her breath coming in short white clouds. Behind her, 3 blocks away, the lights of her own apartment still burned. Jerry would be on the phone by now. He always was. Calling his friends at the precinct, calling the doctor he kept on retainer, building the story before she could tell hers. She knew the routine. She had survived it for 5 years. She reached the Avenue H station just as the last Q train of the night pulled in. The doors hissed open. She stumbled inside and collapsed onto a corner seat, pulling the red knitted sweater tight around her bruised face. The carriage was nearly empty. A homeless man slept across 2 seats at the far end. A teenage boy stared at his phone headphones in eyes glazed. And across from Aretha, a middle-aged white woman in a beige raincoat sat with a folded newspaper on her lap. Pearl earrings, expensive handbag, clean shoes. The woman looked up. Her eyes traveled across Aretha's face, the fresh cut above her eyebrow, the swelling around her left eye, the dried blood on her bottom lip. For half a second, something flickered in the woman's expression. Recognition, concern, maybe even pity. Then she lifted her newspaper and looked away. Aretha closed her eyes. This was the world Jerry had taught her to expect. People see, people know, and then people choose not to. You're an orphan, Aretha. Nobody will ever believe you. Nobody is coming for you. 5 years of those words, whispered in the dark, hissed through clenched teeth, written into the silence between meals. Jerry hadn't just hit her. He had renovated her, stripped her down to the studs and rebuilt her into something small enough to fit inside his fist. The train lurched forward. And then the air changed. It was subtle at first. A shift in pressure like the moment before a storm breaks. The temperature didn't drop, but something colder than temperature settled over the carriage. A scent drifted toward her. Cedar, clean leather. And underneath it, faint and metallic, something that smelled like rain on a knife blade. Aretha didn't turn her head. She felt him sit down beside her. She kept her eyes on the floor, on the scuffed black tile, on the chewing gum someone had stepped on weeks ago. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. The way her therapist had taught her back before Jerry made her stop going. But her body knew before her mind did. The man beside her was dangerous. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't scrolling a phone. He wasn't doing any of the small unconscious things that ordinary people do on trains. He was just sitting, perfectly still, taking up space the way a mountain takes up space. She risked a glance. Sharp jawline, black hair swept back from a high forehead, East Asian features carved with the kind of precision that didn't come from genetics alone. He wore a tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt open at the throat, and a silver watch on his left wrist that caught the fluorescent light like a held breath. But it was the tattoos that made her stomach drop. Dark ink curled up the side of his neck. Dragons, detailed, deliberate, alive in the harsh light. She could see more ink on the back of his right hand disappearing into his sleeve. He turned his head slightly. His eyes met hers. They weren't cruel. They weren't kind. They were something else entirely. Focused. Patient. The eyes of a man who had spent his life watching, calculating, deciding who lived and who didn't. Aretha looked away first. Across the aisle, the woman in the beige raincoat had lowered her newspaper an inch. She was watching them now. Her lips were pressed thin with disapproval. A bruised black woman and a tattooed Asian man. To her, it must have looked like a story she had already decided the ending of. The man beside Aretha noticed too. He spoke. Not to Aretha. To the woman. "Silence is also a form of complicity, ma'am." His voice was low, calm, almost gentle. He didn't even look up when he said it. The woman froze, her cheeks flushed, her hands tightened on her newspaper. "I don't know what you're—" "You saw her face when she sat down," he said. "You saw it and you turned the page. I am only asking that next time you do not." The train slowed for the next station. The woman stood up so fast her newspaper fluttered to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She rushed toward the doors, her heels clicking against the tile, and she was gone into the rain before the next stop was even announced. The carriage was quiet. Aretha realized she had stopped breathing. She had spent 5 years invisible. 5 years wearing her bruises like a secret nobody asked about. And in less than 10 seconds, this stranger, this dangerous tattooed stranger, had made the world look at her. He hadn't even raised his voice. She turned to him, slowly. The fear was still there, sharp and bright in her chest, but underneath it something new was beginning to bloom, something that felt almost like being seen. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded silk handkerchief. White, embroidered with a small dragon in dark thread. He placed it gently on her lap. "Your lip is bleeding again," he said. Aretha touched her mouth. Her fingers came away red. "The train will stop at Canal Street in 4 minutes," he continued, his voice still low and even. "Your husband is waiting on the platform." The world tilted. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands began to shake so hard she could barely hold the handkerchief. She had told no one. She had taken 3 different trains. She had thrown her phone into a sewer drain 6 blocks from the apartment. "How—" her voice cracked. "How do you know I have a husband?" The man turned to face her fully. For the first time, he allowed something into his expression. It wasn't a smile. It was older than a smile. Sadder. "Because I have been watching him for a very long time, Aretha." Her name. He said her name. Aretha couldn't speak. The train rattled on through the dark tunnel, but the world inside the carriage had gone silent. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The man beside her, this stranger who knew her name, who knew her husband, who had been watching, folded his hands calmly in his lap. He told her his name was Kang Ji-hoon. He told her she had 3 minutes until Canal Street. He told her to listen carefully. She nodded. She didn't know why. Some old instinct in her, older than fear, told her this was not a man who needed to lie. Her husband, Ji-hoon, explained quietly, was not waiting on that platform alone. Jerry had called the police. He had called a doctor named Richard Voss, who had signed 3 previous psychiatric holds for women trying to leave their husbands. He had called a friend at the 5th Precinct named Officer Daly. They were all on the platform now, waiting for her. Aretha's throat closed. "He's going to commit me," she whispered. "Yes. He did it before, to his first wife. I know, because Marianne Hudson was my mother's friend, before she died in that hospital." The tunnel walls flashed past the window. Aretha felt something crack open inside her chest. For 5 years she had been screaming into a sealed room, and now a stranger on a train was telling her the room had walls she had never known existed. The train began to slow. Ji-hoon's voice was lower now, steady. He told her exactly what would happen when the doors opened. Jerry would smile. He would call her name. He would say she was confused. He would reach for her arm. The officers would believe him because he was a lawyer in a wet coat, and she was a black woman with a bleeding lip and no ID. Each word landed like a stone. Ji-hoon would step off the train first, he said. He would hand Jerry a business card. Jerry would read the name on it, and he would go very pale, and he would tell the officers there had been a misunderstanding. Aretha would walk past him. She would not look at him. She would not speak. She would get into a black car waiting at the curb. "Why should I trust you?" she whispered. Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment. He told her he wasn't asking her to trust him. He was only asking her to walk 15 feet to a car. After that, she could decide. The doors hissed open. Canal Street platform glowed under harsh white light. Rain leaked through the grates above. And there, exactly where Ji-hoon had said he would be, stood Jerry Hudson. He was wearing his charcoal Burberry coat, the one he saved for important meetings. His sandy hair was perfectly combed. He held an umbrella above 2 uniformed officers and a tall, thin man in wire rim glasses carrying a leather case, Dr. Voss. When Jerry saw Aretha through the glass, his face transformed. It was a beautiful performance. Concern, relief. The exact expression of a worried husband whose troubled wife had wandered off again. Aretha had seen that face 1,000 times. It was the face he wore at dinner parties. Ji-hoon stepped off the train. He didn't rush. He walked the way a tide comes in. Steady. Inevitable. He crossed the platform in 5 long strides and stopped 1 foot in front of Jerry. He held out a single black business card. Jerry's smile flickered. He took the card automatically, the way lawyers always do. He looked down. The card was matte black. No name. No phone number. Only a small silver dragon embossed in the bottom corner and 1 word printed across the center in clean white letters. Kang. Aretha watched the color leave her husband's face. It happened slowly. First his lips went pale, then his cheeks. His hand began to tremble around the umbrella handle. A single drop of rain landed on the card. The silver dragon caught the light. Jerry whispered something she couldn't hear. Officer Daly stepped forward frowning, asking if something was wrong. Jerry didn't look at him. He was looking at Ji-hoon. There had been a misunderstanding, Jerry told the officers. His voice was thin and reedy. A different voice from the one he used at home. He and his wife had simply argued. It was a private matter. He was so sorry to have wasted their time. Dr. Voss began to protest, but Jerry cut him off. He would handle this from here. Aretha walked past him. She did exactly what Ji-hoon had told her to do. She did not look at Jerry. She did not speak. She felt his eyes on her like the heat of a stove, but she kept walking, her sneakers squeaking on the wet platform tiles, the silk handkerchief still clenched in her fist. At the top of the stairs, she emerged into the rain. A black Mercedes Maybach idled at the curb, its rear door already open. A young Korean man in a dark suit stood beside it holding a black umbrella. He bowed slightly and gestured her inside. She got in. The leather seats swallowed her. The door closed. The rain disappeared. A moment later, Ji-hoon slid in beside her. He did not look at her right away. He looked out the window at the platform stairs, at the city, at the rain. "He'll come for me," she said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. "He always comes. He will try. The system believes him." Ji-hoon turned to her then. In the soft amber light of the car, his face looked younger, tired. "The system also believes me, but for different reasons." The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Aretha pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the city slide past. Chinatown's red lanterns blurred into Soho's gallery lights. They crossed Canal, then Broome, then Spring. The buildings grew taller, glass and steel. When the Maybach finally slowed, it was at the base of a black skyscraper in Tribeca, a tower that pierced the storm clouds like a knife held upright. A doorman opened her door. Aretha stepped out into a private underground entrance. The rain didn't reach her. The wind didn't reach her. 2 more men in dark suits stood by a private elevator, and they bowed slightly when Ji-hoon walked past. The elevator was made of black glass. It rose for a long time. When the doors opened at the top, Aretha stepped out into a vast penthouse of charcoal stone and warm light, and there in the foyer, waiting with a folded blanket over her arm, stood a black woman with kind eyes and the steady posture of someone who had survived something terrible. "You must be Aretha," the woman said softly. "I'm Olivia. Come inside, baby. You're safe now." Aretha's knees almost gave out. For the first time in 5 years, someone had called her baby and meant it. Aretha woke up at 4:47 in the morning. She had not meant to sleep at all. She had sat down on the edge of the king-sized bed in the guest suite just for a moment, and the next thing she knew, the city was a blue-gray smear outside the windows, and her bruised cheek was pressed into a pillow that smelled like clean linen. Someone had laid a folded cashmere blanket over her in the night. There was a glass of water on the nightstand, a small ceramic dish with 2 white pills, and a handwritten note that read, "For the swelling, only if you want them." Oh. She had not been asked. She had been offered. It was such a small thing, and it broke something open inside her. She washed her face in the marble bathroom and pulled on the soft gray sweatpants and white t-shirt that had been left on the chair. Then she walked out on bare feet, following the smell of coffee. Olivia was in the kitchen. Dark stone counters, brass fixtures, a wall of windows looking south toward the Statue of Liberty barely visible through the morning mist. Olivia stood at the espresso machine in jeans and a denim shirt, her gray-streaked hair pulled back, humming something low and bluesy. She turned when she heard Aretha's footsteps. She didn't startle. She just smiled. "Sit, baby. I made grits." Aretha sat. Olivia placed a bowl of stone-ground grits in front of her with butter melting in the center and a pinch of black pepper across the top. Beside it, scrambled eggs, a cup of coffee with cream, the exact breakfast Aretha's foster grandmother had made for her 22 years ago, the only kind year of her childhood. Aretha's hand began to shake around the spoon. Olivia did not pretend not to notice. She sat down across the island, wrapped her own hands around her coffee mug, and waited. She did not fill the silence. She did not ask questions. She simply made room. When Aretha finally spoke, her voice came out small. She asked how long Olivia had been here. 10 years, Olivia said. She had come in through a different door than Aretha, but a door of the same shape. Her ex-husband had been a police sergeant in Atlanta. He had broken her collarbone, her wrist, and her belief that anyone in a uniform would ever help her. She had run with 1 suitcase and a Greyhound ticket. Ji-hoon's mother had run the shelter that took her in before she died. Olivia spoke gently, but she did not soften the truth. Ji-hoon had not rescued her, she said. He had simply opened a door and stood beside it and let her decide whether she had the strength to walk through. The walking had been hers. The healing had been hers. He gave her a job, a salary, a home, and the one thing no abuser ever gives: time. Time without fear. Time to remember who she had been before someone tried to convince her she was nothing. Aretha was crying before she realized she had started. Not loud, panicked crying. Not the silent, terrified crying she had perfected under Jerry's roof. This was something deeper. The kind of crying you do when you have been holding your breath for 5 years and a stranger finally tells you it is safe to exhale. Olivia did not move to hug her. She slid a clean cloth napkin across the counter and went back to her coffee and let Aretha cry the way a body needs to cry, privately, without performance. After a while, Aretha wiped her face. She asked the question she had not been able to ask Ji-hoon. Why her? Why a stranger on a train? Why now? Olivia thought about it for a long moment. Ji-hoon had been watching Jerry Hudson for almost 6 years, she said. Not because of Aretha, because of Marianne, Jerry's first wife, who had died in a psychiatric hospital after Jerry signed the papers. Ji-hoon's mother had loved Marianne. Ji-hoon had been a teenager when she died, and he had promised himself he would not let it happen again. He had been waiting for Jerry to choose his next victim, and then for that victim to choose herself. Aretha had chosen herself the moment she walked out the door. Ji-hoon had simply been on the next train. Aretha sat with that for a long time. Then she stood up. Something inside her had shifted quietly, the way a bone slides back into place. She thanked Olivia, walked back to the guest suite, and opened the closet where the staff had hung her wet clothes from the night before. The red knitted sweater was there. She took it off the hanger and laid it on the bed. For 5 years, that sweater had been her armor. She had worn it on bad days when the bruises on her arms needed covering. She had wrapped it around herself on the kitchen floor after the worst nights. She had put it on before she left the apartment yesterday, the way a soldier puts on a uniform before walking into a war she already knows she might lose. She picked it up. She held it against her chest. And then slowly, deliberately, with both hands, she tore it down the middle. The wool resisted at first. Then it gave. The seams split with a soft tearing sound, and Aretha kept tearing methodically until the sweater was in pieces on the bed. She was not crying now. She was breathing. She gathered the pieces and dropped them into the wastebasket. She walked to the window and looked out at the gray Manhattan sky, and she said something out loud very quietly to no one but herself. She did not need armor anymore. She was the armor. When she found Jihoon an hour later, he was in the glass-walled gym at the south end of the penthouse, working a heavy bag with slow, deliberate strikes. He was in a black sleeveless shirt. The dragons on his arms moved when he moved. He stopped when he saw her in the doorway. He did not greet her. He simply looked at her the way a man looks at someone who has crossed a threshold he recognizes. Then he walked over and corrected her posture without touching her shoulders, back, chin-level weight even. Power, he told her, was not in the fist. The fist was only a tool. Power began in the eyes. Jerry would always look for the haunted face of a victim. The real work was learning to give him nothing, to stand in a room and simply belong in it. Aretha practiced, standing, breathing, holding ground. It was the first lesson of her new life. It was interrupted by Daniel Cho. He came through the gym door, fast phone still in his hand, his usual cool composure cracked. He spoke in low, rapid Korean. Jihoon's expression went very still. He turned to Aretha. NYPD was on the way up. Jerry had filed a kidnapping report. The 2 NYPD officers who stepped out of the elevator were not the ones from the night before. They were younger, with cleaner uniforms, the kind of officers a precinct sent when they wanted things to look proper. The female officer was black, tall, with kind eyes. Her partner was a wiry white man with a clipboard, and the bored expression of a person who already knew his report would lead nowhere. Jihoon greeted them in the foyer, not the gym. He had changed. Charcoal slacks, a gray cashmere sweater, no visible tattoos. He looked, Aretha realized, with a small start, like a corporate attorney himself. The dragon was hidden. The lawyer was on display. His own lawyer arrived 2 minutes later, breathless from the elevator. A small Korean-American woman in her 60s named Hannah Park. She did not introduce herself to the officers. She simply stood beside Jihoon and listened, hands folded. The officers asked to speak with Ms. Aretha Akim. Aretha stepped forward. She had thought she would be afraid. She was not. She stood the way Jihoon had taught her an hour ago in the gym. Shoulders back, chin level, weight even. Her face still carried the bruises from 2 nights before, but she did not try to hide them, and she did not perform them either. She simply stood in the foyer of a stranger's penthouse and let 2 officers see her the way she actually was. She was not confused. She was not kidnapped. She was not a danger to herself. She told them in clear, calm sentences that she had voluntarily left the apartment she shared with her husband on the night of November 14th. She had taken the Q train. She had been approached by Mr. Kang, an acquaintance of her late mother-in-law. She had accepted his offer of temporary shelter. She intended to file for an order of protection and to retain Ms. Park as her counsel. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not look at Jihoon for permission. The female officer wrote everything down. She glanced at Aretha's bruised cheek twice. The second time, something in her expression shifted. Not pity. Recognition. The officers left without making an arrest. When the elevator doors closed, Hannah Park exhaled and patted Aretha's arm and told her she had done very well. Then she left too, talking quickly into her phone in Korean. The penthouse was quiet again. Ji-hoon poured 2 glasses of water at the kitchen island. He handed one to Aretha. He did not congratulate her. He simply watched her drink, and when she set the glass down, he asked her if she was ready to talk. She said yes. They moved to the library. It was a long room of dark wood and afternoon light. 2 leather chairs faced each other across a low table. Ji-hoon sat. Aretha sat. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was deliberate. He was waiting for her to choose what mattered. She asked him why. Why her? Why a stranger on a train? Why this much trouble for a woman he did not know? For a long time he did not answer. Then he told her about Busan. He had been 8 years old, he said. His mother was a small woman with a quiet laugh, and she taught piano in a back room of their apartment. His father was a lieutenant in a syndicate that ran the docks. His father drank. His father came home angry. His father had a wedding ring he never took off even when he hit her, and the metal of it left a particular kind of mark. Ji-hoon described in a very flat voice the night he hid under the kitchen table while his father killed his mother with his hands. He had been 8. He had not screamed. He had not run. He had simply held his breath and watched his mother's eyes go still, and after that night something in him had decided what kind of man he would not become, and what kind of man he would have to become to make sure no other child ever hid under a table again. He had come to America as a teenager. At 21, his own father was killed in a warehouse in Incheon, and the empire passed to him whether he wanted it or not. He had spent 15 years remaking that empire into something his mother might have possibly recognized. He looked at his hands at the dragons on his knuckles, and he told Aretha something she did not expect. He was not protecting her because she was special to him. He did not know her. He did not love her. He was protecting her because she was a human being, and because every person he saved was in some quiet, impossible way his mother saved one more time. He said he wanted her to know that, because he had learned watching Olivia heal for 10 years that women who escape men like Jerry often confused gratitude with love, and he did not want her to confuse anything. She owed him nothing. She did not have to feel anything for him. Her healing belonged only to her. Aretha did not speak for a long time. When she finally moved, she moved slowly. She reached across the small table and laid her hand over his just for a moment, long enough to say thank you for being honest. Then she pulled it back, and then she stood up. She walked to the window. She thought for a long minute, and then she turned around and told Ji-hoon something that changed the shape of the room. She had something he should know about. She told him about a small public library in Brooklyn off Eastern Parkway, the 800 section, the shelf for literary criticism, a specific copy of a James Baldwin biography, third from the left with a hollowed-out spine. Inside that spine was a USB drive. On that drive were 5 years of her life. Bank statements showing accounts Jerry had opened in her name without her signature. Recordings of him on the phone with Dr. Voss, arranging Marianne's hospitalization. Photographs of every bruise, every cut, every burn, dated geotagged, organized by month. A spreadsheet of the women she suspected were Jerry's other victims with names and last known addresses. She had been building the file since the 2nd year of her marriage. She had not built it to escape. She had built it because somewhere underneath the orphan complex, Jerry had taught her a small, stubborn part of her had refused to disappear. Ji-hoon stared at her. For the first time since she had met him, his perfect composure cracked. Not into shock, into something else, something close to awe. He had thought he was rescuing a victim. He realized slowly that he had been recruited by a survivor. Daniel Cho appeared in the library doorway, phone in hand. His face was the color of paper. He said one sentence in English so Aretha could understand. Minseo had called from Boston. Someone was outside her dormitory window. Ji-hoon moved fast. Within 90 seconds of Daniel Cho's call, he was on the phone with a private security team in Cambridge. Within 7 minutes, the man outside Minseo's window, a thin Hispanic man in a hooded sweatshirt, had been intercepted in the parking lot. His wallet contained a hand-drawn map of Minseo's class schedule. The map was in Jerry Hudson's handwriting. Ji-hoon read the photograph of the map twice. He set the phone face down on the library table. He did not raise his voice. He simply went very still in a way that frightened Daniel more than rage would have. Then he turned to Aretha. He told her the truth plainly. Jerry had partnered with a man named Marcus Reyes, a Queens trafficker, who had once owed Ji-hoon his life. Marcus had been clean for 8 years, and now he was not. Jerry had paid him in stolen NYPD case files. They were coming to the penthouse tonight. They believed Ji-hoon would be flying to Boston. They believed wrong. Aretha listened. Then she asked one question. She asked if she could be there when they arrived. Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment. He told her it was her choice, and her choice alone, and he would honor whichever she made. She made it. By 9:47 that night, the foyer had been emptied of everything that could be broken. Olivia had been moved to a safe floor below. Daniel and 4 men were positioned in the shadows of the long hallway. Hannah Park was on a secure line with the FBI field office, the recording already running. The USB drive retrieved from the Brooklyn Library 2 hours earlier sat on the obsidian foyer table in a small, clear evidence bag. Aretha stood beside it. She wore black slacks and a cream silk blouse Olivia had pressed for her. Her hair was pulled back. Her bruises were not covered. She did not stand the way she had stood for 5 years in Jerry's kitchen. She stood the way Ji-hoon had taught her, shoulders back, chin level, weight even. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Marcus Reyes stepped out first. He was a heavy-shouldered man in his 40s with prison ink on his forearms and a gun at his hip. Behind him came 2 younger men also armed, and behind them almost casually walked Jerry Hudson. Jerry was still in his Burberry coat. He saw Aretha. He saw the bruises he had given her healing now, and the calm in her eyes and the silk blouse. And for the first time in his life, his face did something Aretha had never seen before. It hesitated. Marcus raised his gun and pointed it at the shadows of the hallway where he could feel rather than see Ji-hoon's men. Ji-hoon stepped out of the shadows alone. He was not armed. He spoke to Marcus in Korean, then in English, his voice the same low, even pitch he had used on the train. He reminded Marcus of a hospital bed in Flushing 8 years ago, and a woman named Teresa who had sat beside that bed and prayed. Teresa had buried a son the year before. She had not asked Ji-hoon for money to save Marcus, only for time. Ji-hoon told Marcus that betrayal did not make a man free, it only changed the master. Marcus's gun did not lower, but his hand began to shake. While the 2 men stood frozen in their old debt, Aretha did the thing she had come there to do. She stepped forward. She walked the 15 feet across the foyer until she was standing 2 arms' lengths from Jerry Hudson. She did not raise her voice. She did not reach for him. She simply set the evidence bag with the USB drive on the foyer table between them, where the light caught it. Then she spoke. She told him that he had taught her for 5 years that no one would believe her because she was an orphan. He had been wrong about almost everything, but he had been most wrong about that. Being an orphan did not mean being alone. It meant she had learned to believe herself at 6 years old. That turned out to be the only voice that ever really mattered. She told him the drive contained 5 years of her life, bank fraud, recordings, photographs, the names of 9 other women. By morning, the FBI field office in Manhattan would have a copy. 2 of the 9 other women had already agreed to come forward. She told him the system he had used as a weapon was about to become the weapon used against him. And then she told him the last thing. She told him she forgave him. Not because he deserved it, not because what he had done was forgivable, but because hating him for the rest of her life would mean he still got to live in her head rent-free, and she had given him that apartment for 5 years, and she was evicting him tonight. Jerry's mouth opened. No sound came out. Behind him, Marcus Reyes lowered his gun and set it on the floor. The NYPD, tipped by Hannah Park's call, walked off the elevator at 10:14 p.m. with 3 federal agents behind them. They took Jerry Hudson out in handcuffs, still in his Burberry coat. He did not look at Aretha when they led him past her. She did not look at him either. She realized already, let him go. 6 months later, the cafe was on a quiet corner of Brooklyn, 2 blocks from the library, where she had once hidden a USB drive inside a James Baldwin biography. Aretha sat at a small table near the window, a laptop open in front of her, an iced oat milk latte sweating beside it. The bruises were gone. The hair was longer, cut into soft layers around her face. She wore a mustard yellow sweater she had bought herself with her own money from a bookstore down the street. On the screen of her laptop was a manuscript. The title page read, "The Orphan's Foundation." Across the street, parked at the curb, a black Maybach idled with its engine off. Ji-hoon was in the back seat reading a book. He had not come inside. He never did. He understood the way he had understood with Olivia, that there were rooms in a healing woman's life no one else got to enter, no matter how much they had helped her find the door. A young woman in a denim jacket walked into the cafe. She was maybe 23. A fading bruise along her jawline, half hidden by foundation. Her hands shook around her phone. She ordered a black coffee, sat at a table by herself, and pretended to read a menu she had clearly already memorized. Aretha watched her for a long minute. Then she stood up. She walked over with a folded note containing the number of a hotline, an attorney, and a women's shelter, and a second small thing she had begun carrying for moments like this. A folded white silk handkerchief embroidered with a small dragon in dark thread. She set both on the young woman's table. She did not introduce herself. She did not ask the woman's story. She simply met her eyes for a moment that lasted less than a second and longer than a year. Then she said one sentence very softly. "You are not alone. When you are ready." The young woman's eyes filled with water. Aretha smiled gently and walked back to her table, sat down, and typed the last sentence of her chapter onto the screen. "The day I stopped running was the day I realized I had been running toward myself all along." Outside the window, Ji-hoon looked up from his book. He saw her through the glass. He did not wave. He simply nodded the small nod of one survivor to another and went back to reading. Aretha closed her laptop. She finished her latte. She walked out into the New York afternoon, into a life she had built with her own 2 hands, and the door of her old cage closed quietly behind her, and she did not look back. So that was Aretha's story. A woman the world told to disappear. A man the world told to fear. And a partnership that was never really about rescue at all. It was about 2 people who had both in their own ways learned the same hard lesson, that nobody saves you. They only open the door. The walking through is always yours. I want to ask you something before you go. What do you think actually saved Aretha? Was it Kang Ji-hoon, the dangerous stranger on the train? Was it Olivia, the woman in the kitchen, who slid a napkin across the counter and let her cry? Was it the USB drive she had been quietly building since the 2nd year of her marriage? Or was it the moment in the foyer, when she chose to forgive a man who never deserved it, not for him, but for her? I have my own answer, but I want to hear yours. Drop it in the comments below. Tell me your city. Tell me what time it is right now, and tell me which moment in this story stayed with you the longest. I read every single comment, and somewhere out there tonight there is a woman scrolling through these comments who needs to read what you have to say. Maybe even more than she needs to hear from me. If this story moved, you hit that like button. It is the biggest thing you can do to help stories like this find the people who need them. And if you are new here, subscribe. We tell true feeling stories about ordinary people who did the bravest thing a person can do. They believed themselves first. I will see you in the next one. Stay strong. You are not alone.